So thank you all and welcome to this session. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Margaret Sheil. I'm the Vice-Chancellor of QUT, and I'm going to be your chair for this morning's session, or this afternoon session. And I'm not going to attempt to do anything profound about AI. I'll leave that to our guest speaker and the questions, and we've obviously heard a little bit in the earlier session, and you know, clearly it's a topic of great interest to us all, and we're very keen to both experience and learn more about that. Before I introduce Toby, I'm just going to give a little shout out to a little bit of history. So in 2000, around the time of 2000, when it was, for those of you who are old enough to remember the dot-com boom, Australian universities were bleeding academics and students and staff in IT into industry at a very rapid rate. And a group of individuals, led by Vicky Sarah, who was the CEO of the ARC, Brian Anderson, who was president of the Academy of Science at the time, and also at ANU, the chief scientist, Robin Batterham, and others, including Arun Sharma, who was at UNSW at the time, realised that we needed a big investment in IT, and they, together as part of a bigger package of reforms, established the National ICT Centre, or NICTA as it became known. And one of its remits was to attract great scientists and academics from around the world to then go on and nurture the next generation, and it did that through an incredible number of PhDs supported through the program. And Toby came to Australia, Toby Walsh, as part of that, joined the UNSW node of NICTA, where he is now the head of a new institute, an AI institute. He's a Scientia professor, and he's also an ARC Laureate Fellow, which is another scheme that attracts and retains the best talent here in Australia. He is excellent communicator, both in print and in person, and he's been a powerful advocate to both explain and caution against the opportunities presented by AI in a whole range of forums, to government officials, media in the UN, has the privilege of being banned from Russia. I think that's an interesting one on your CV. We also have conflict of interest here. He's an adjunct professor at QUT, so I've had the opportunity to hear him speak on a number of occasions, even if I was in my office watching you on Zoom, Toby. But it has given me the opportunity to hear his insights previously, and I'm sure it will be a rich conversation. And so he'll address us for 15 minutes or so, and then I'll take questions from the audience. Thank you, Toby.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Margaret, for that kind, generous introduction. My journey starts when I was a young boy. It starts when I went to the cinema to see this wonderful movie, Stanley Kubrick's, of course, classic, 2001: A Space Odyssey. And I saw a future full of intelligent computers and robots. And it captured my imagination. And shortly after that, I was lucky enough to find access to some really quite expensive, those days, computers, and realized that that future was coming and I could help build that. And so for the next 40-something years, I've been trying to achieve that, trying to build that intelligent future. And for most of those 40 years, no one cared, which was fine. No one cared because it was still science fiction. But, of course, on November the 30th, 2022, overnight, that all changed. Everyone started to care. Everyone was somewhat surprised that AI had, it seemed, overnight arrived into our lives. It wasn't just the public or university administrators, or it was even people in the field. Many of my colleagues were surprised at the rate of progress that seemed to be happening. It was even a surprise for OpenAI. The story I've been told, and you'll see at the punchline that there's an obvious truth to the story, was that they'd actually developed ChatGPT, and as they would, they gave it to the internal product group to evaluate before they gave it out to the public. And the internal product group played with it for a while and came back with, and I think this is a beautiful observation, interesting, but what would you do with it? And so they, as you do in Silicon Valley, they pivoted. They tried to find some specific applications, some killer application for it. And I don't know why, but they didn't actually come across anything that they thought really was really going to make a big difference. And so there was a meeting to decide what to do next. Sam Altman, the CEO, was at the meeting, and the main item on the agenda was, well, let's just bin this. We learned something really useful in building it, but we need to focus all of the company's efforts on the next big model that's coming out, GPT-4. And that was the default, that was the favored option. And Sam apparently said, you know what? Why don't we just give it to the public and see what happens? And you know that was probably, I wish I was a fly on the wall, but you know that was probably true, because otherwise they'd have come up with a proper name for it. Anyway, they did, and the world seems to have changed. Of course, it wasn't really an overnight success. I mean, even though for many people it seemed to be that AI had arrived. I mean, AI actually started on Monday, June the 18th in 1956. When they had the first meeting to talk about the idea of building AI. And there's a lot of AI already in your lives that you probably had no idea was AI. This is probably the oldest example of AI that's actually one of the most common uses of AI in almost everyone's life. Every time you get directions out of your phone or your car sat nav, it's a little AI algorithm that's working out real time, the quickest way, given the current traffic conditions, to get you from A to B. But there are many other examples. Tonight when you sit at home feeling tired and you turn on Netflix, Netflix don't tell you this. Interesting to think why they don't tell you this, but they're essentially an AI company. You open that homepage of Netflix and everything on that is chosen by the AI. Which are the rows of recommendations, what are the movies within each row, the order of the movies in the row, even the picture you see is chosen specifically for you. And 80% of the stuff that people watch on Netflix is not what they came to Netflix to watch. It's what the AI thought you might be like and has chosen for you. So without the AI, Netflix would not be the company it is. So there's a lot of AI like that hidden in our lives that you're not so aware of. The wonderful thing about now, why it's becoming so visible to us, is that the technology is now very democratized. It's very easy to build stuff with AI. It's reached a maturity, we've still got a way to go, but it's reached a maturity in which there's a lot we can do, and there's very few barriers to stop people doing that. There was an interesting memo leaked last year out of Google, pointing this out, saying, in the Warren Buffett sense of, you want a moat to protect your business from everyone else's, there is no moat with AI. Colleagues of mine at Stanford have built a ChatGPT clone for $600 of Amazon Web Service credits. There really is very little secret in there. It's all published in the open literature. There's lots of open source tools. It's very easy to access. It doesn't need what it used to need, which was a PhD. Now it just needs a small amount of competency in IT to be able to get off and do things. Well, I don't actually completely agree with that memo. There's one thing that is a small moat, well, actually a very significant moat, and one of the important take-homes from my talk today. It's always actually been a moat for AI in general and for IT, which is data. That access to the data, companies are discovering that the data they have is an oil mine that they need to mine. Universities, of course, we're sitting on vast troves of data again, which are going to be integral to our ability to profit from AI. As a good example of that, to show you what the future is going to look like, this was one of the most interesting announcements I saw in the last few months, which is a large language model that was produced by Bloomberg. Obviously, they called it Bloomberg GPT, which speaks finance. Now, there were two companies in the world that could have done this, Bloomberg or Reuters. Reuters are probably doing this as we speak, and they're about to make the announcement. I would be unsurprised if they didn't. They wanted a language model that could speak finance, wouldn't be distracted by talking about astrology or zoology, all the other things. So they worked with OpenAI to fine-tune it on all the trove of information, finance information that a company like Bloomberg sits on. So now if you open your Bloomberg terminal, for rich people who have Bloomberg terminals, that is, You can ask it finance questions. You can ask it all about, credit derivatives, whatever finance people talk about. Right? And it's the hallucination problem, the way it makes stuff up, tends to disappear when you fine-tune the models on particular languages. So similarly, if you work in an insurance company, there's going to be a large language model. It's going to be an enterprise product. People are going to come in, fine-tune it on your policies and practices and customers so that it can really speak and focus in a focused way on your business. And that's also going to happen, I'm sure, within universities. That, the way that we're going to answer student queries at 3 a.m. is by having a large language model that's trained on our university, that knows how our university works and can confidently correctly answer, hopefully, at 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, it's easy to be blown away by their fluency and the capabilities that we're starting to see. But you should realize that AI still today is remarkably stupid. We've still got a long way to go. And this is my favorite example. I discovered it recently. You ask an AI, how many S's in the word bananas? And it confidently tells you, everything. There are 3 S's in the word bananas. So, okay, let's make it easier. How many B's in the word bananas? There are 2 B's in the words bananas. I mean, it's actually worth understanding why it makes this mistake. It's because it's a statistical engine. It's not understanding the language like you and I. And the questions that people struggle to spell the word bananas because they can never remember how many A's, 3, or how many N's, 2 in the word bananas. They get it wrong. And so every question you ask ChatGPT about letters in the word bananas, doesn't matter what the letter is, it will tell you 2 or 3. It's not understanding language the way that we understand language. Here's one of these text-to-image tools. I love this one. Cat painted by Picasso on the left. And you get some beautiful Picasso-esque cats. But if you ask it for Picasso painted by a cat, well, I don't think those are Picasso. And if my cat could paint, I'm not sure it would do that. Any permutation of the words cat and painting and Picasso give you the same thing. But despite those limitations, if we fine-tune the model, the domain of application, we're going to see some remarkable innovations happening as we go from these, party pieces of a language model that can answer questions from astronomy to zoology, to ones that are focused on particular things. The Khan Academy, that you will all know about, had a really good example when they launched with OpenAI. They've got a Socratic tutor. It will not answer the questions for you, which is fantastic, because it will ask you questions, like a good Socratic tutor would, that will lead you to the answer, which of course is a much better learning experience. They fine-tuned the ChatGPT to be specifically a Socratic tutor. Now, the good thing is that these sorts of AIs are going to arrive into your lives, in many cases without you having to do anything. That the future is going to be that all of our apps, all of the programs that we use on computers, and indeed all of our devices, are going to have some AI sprinkled to them. So you already see this. You take Microsoft as an example, but you can pick lots of other examples. Every program, Excel, Word, the mail program, are having little AI assistants, Microsoft called them co-pilots, embedded in them. And so much of this is going to arrive. Of course, that's not going to give you the specific focused applications that are really going to be, I think, perhaps the most impactful part of the next wave of the AI revolution. So it's going to be very transformative. It's going to, I hope, be very helpful and help us improve our productivity and do all the dull, repetitive things you do on a computer today. The AI assistant is hopefully going to be doing for you in the future. So what does that, stepping back a bit and thinking of the broader question, what does that leave us as, as educators, as preparing the next generation of people for life in general? Well, of course, the most important observation is that technology is accelerating. AI is part of that trend. We are living in exponential times. I always think people don't realize, one of the most important exponentials is the exponential that we call science. More scientists are alive today than have ever lived. So the mathematicians in the room will recognize that. That is a hallmark of an exponential. The reason that science is progressing is that there are more of us doing it, and there is more science that we stand on top of. We are literally standing on the shoulders of the giants that came before us. And so we are living in ever-accelerating times. And so the most important thing, I think, in terms of education is ultimately going to be lifelong learning. When you leave school or you leave the university, you cannot be given all the skills that you need because you will be working with technologies that have yet to be invented. And so giving people that ability to learn lifelong is going to be an integral part. And of course, universities are going to be part of helping that lifelong learning with short courses and the like, where people can come in and pick up whatever the latest technologies are. And so given that lifelong learning is going to be, what are the specific skills that are going to be most important? Well, I want to share with you what I think are going to be the three most important skills that we need to help equip students with in the future. First of all are the technical skills. There's going to be a future in inventing the future. And the great thing about the future is the future never arrives. So that's never going to end. So that's the first one. And of course, not everyone is a geek like me. I know not everyone wants to be inventing the future. There's lots of other important things that we need to do in our world than inventing, hopefully, a better future. So there are two other skills that I think are going to be increasingly important in our lives. The second one is our emotional and social intelligence. Our superpower is not our intelligence. Our superpower is our ability to work together. That's why we develop language, that's why we develop writing in part, is it allows us to work together cooperatively on shared goals. There are plentiful jobs where emotional social intelligence are the most important characteristic. I'm told the most important characteristic of a CEO is their emotional intelligence. To lead people, you need to understand them, you need to motivate them. But equally, there's loads of other professions, whether it be a salesperson or politician, where your emotional intelligence is central to your ability to do that job, which is why it's also really upsetting to see the humanities not being supported by the government as much as they are, because what are the subjects that most best teach social and emotional intelligence? Well, it tends to be the humanities, and us scientists should be given more of that as well. And then the third and final skill that's going to be really important for the future, increasingly so, is our creativity. That machines are not very creative, just like they're not very emotionally sensitive, and we already see that happening. You look at hipster culture, we're already embracing the artistic and the artisan. We pay extra for homemade bread and artisan cheese. And indeed, the mass-produced period that we've gone through is the product of the first industrial revolution, where it was a way to be able to deliver the sorts of goods that were only by mass producing them. And I suspect the next wave, driven by technologies like AI, are going to be very much about personalized. We only accept mass-produced stuff because it's the cheap way to get it to us. If we can have it personalized to our desires, it's going to be even better. So I'm going to end there. I do have some books, if you're interested in reading more, that are written for a general audience. I'll encourage you to look at those. But just to end with the observation that people often ask me the question, am I optimistic or am I pessimistic about the future that AI is bringing towards us? And I say both. I'm pessimistic because there's a tsunami of problems, the climate emergency, increasing global insecurity. There's a whole, I'm embarrassed for young people today to tell them, for them to discover the world that we're going to be leaving them. But equally, I'm optimistic in the long term that the only way we're going to be able to tackle these wicked problems is if we embrace the technologies like AI and ensure that they're used for the positive good. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Toby. That was a terrific introduction, and I can see that the questions are coming in. I was reflecting when you showed the Netflix that every so often I'm not paying attention and I go to my daughter's Netflix login and I think, what's all this stuff?
You might have discovered something fun.
Yeah. Well, I discover what where she.
I hope you're not too concerned.
No, I'm not concerned at all. But yes, but we do also have a spare login, which used to be in an Airbnb, and that also produced some interesting things. So I was a bit concerned about some of the people that rented our Airbnb. Anyway, on a more serious note, I think one of the first question that came in was, in your opinion, how far away are we from generative AI that is capable of analysing and iteratively improving itself? Is there a technological singularity likely within our lifetime?
Well, I have written an essay entitled "Why the Singularity May Never Be Near."
Right.
And my personal opinion is that I don't see any laws of physics. It's a beautiful, seductive idea, the idea that at some point machines will be smart enough and they can just start improving themselves. But there are a number of things like laws of physics that might get in the way. And intelligence has its own limits. I mean, I can give you the perfect strategy for the casino next door, which is, and it doesn't matter how smart you are, you will not beat my strategy, I promise you. Because my strategy is, as soon as you walk in, turn around and walk out. You cannot do better than that, provably. So it doesn't matter how smart you are. So I don't think intelligence is the whole thing. But I have written a previous book, which was titled 2062, which was predicting when we might get machines, which I believe we will do. I think it would be terribly conceited to think that we couldn't get machines that were as smart as us. I mean, there's nothing really particularly special about human-level intelligence, other than we were one of the smartest things around. We were able to develop language that helped us to work together. We were smart enough to do what we've done, and we're not smart enough to have done better. In particular, when I look at things like the climate, I think we could have done a better job. So there's nothing special about human intelligence, and certainly where we have built machines to match human performance, whether it be playing chess or reading x-rays or diagnosing pulmonary disease or whatever it is, the narrow focus domains where we put the hard work in to build intelligence in machines, we've typically got to human level and then not stop there. Why would we stop there? Machines can look at larger data sets, machines can think faster, machines never forget things. I mean, that would be wonderful, never to forget anything. I wish that was true.
Great. So our next one is, can AI be used by universities to create a moat, a competitive advantage in attracting researchers and students?
Yeah, I mean, the great thing is, I mean, as mentioned in the introduction, we've set up this new AI institute at UNSW. And when we set it up, we went around the university, finding out all the different AI that was happening in a big university like UNSW, as it is, in all the other universities represented in this room. And unsurprisingly, although I was pleasantly surprised in some sense to discover it, there was much more AI happening outside the computer science department than inside it. More than, well, we were the minority, and I thought we were going to be the majority. But wonderfully, AI has left the computer science building and is to be found throughout the university. And the astronomers are using it to catalogue stars, the material scientists are using it to discover new materials. Of course, medicine is embracing it rapidly. It was found in the law school where they were worrying about the implications of how we're going to regulate it. I even co-supervise a student in the art school looking at how we can use AI to make musicians more creative. So that's just an example of how AI now is at a moment where it's easy for people to pick up and adopt, not just in business, but in university. And it has the potential for helping us really accelerate how we do research. You can't read all the papers on cancer. Papers on cancer are published quicker than a human could read them. There's hundreds of papers written every day. You could not read them. So how are we going to keep on top of this literature and find connections between disparate sources of knowledge is by having AI do the reading for us.
That's certainly our experience at QUT, as you know, with the digital media and the disinformation and communications team and the work of Jean Burgess and others. It's been outside the computer science departments that's been the leader. What about cognitive offloading, the positives and negatives of students offloading thinking to tools such as Gen AI?
Well, that's a fantastic question. I thank the person who asked that. Yes, that is one of the big potential risks, that we will dumb ourselves down. I suspect you, ladies and gentlemen, we're the last generation that knows how to read maps. Because no one bothers to read maps anymore. No one understands their local environment, because we just rely on following those directions. We're certainly the last generation that knows how to subtract. That's something that only machines do now. And so, yes, if we don't exercise those skills, as an example, when people say, that's the death of the essay. Well, essays, although they were a slightly lazy way to assess students, served a number of really important purposes that do not go away just because we've got generative tools that can help us write. Their ability to form arguments, our ability to communicate, those are really important skills that we were partly trying to improve and partly trying to measure. And so if we're not flexing those muscles, I do worry that we will actually wake up and realize that we've dumbed ourselves down. And so that we should continue. If you think about calculators, I remember when I was at school, calculators arrived and people bemoaned the fact that it was going to be the death of the arithmetic. Well, there was a certain truth to that. And the norm now is, of course, that you still have to learn your arithmetic. In primary school, you're not given a calculator then till you've shown command. And so I think we're going to, again, continue to do that. Although, as always, there's a positive side to this. I remember one of my colleagues recently telling me, he said, some of my PhD students, and they're all, as you can expect, not speaking English as a first language, they're much smarter than I thought they were. They're handing in, research that is so much better written. I really am sad that I've underestimated their intelligence up to now, because language was a barrier. And these tools have removed that barrier for those students. And so there are some really positive uses. But we have to be mindful, as the questionnaire suggests, that we don't end up dumbing ourselves down.
And I think we've got time for one more question. So it's hard to choose from a very rich array here, but I guess it goes to a little bit of that, the question that you had which is something that's a little dear to my heart. So the source of information for AI remains with the global north. And what do you think is happening in terms of reducing the biases in AI and the data sets they're drawing from? Is there anything we can do to moderate that?
Well, as those of you following the news would have seen recently, Google, with their latest, largest model, Gemini, have had a huge amount of egg on their face because of the biases, the diversity issues that their generative tool there that makes images was quickly demonstrated to have. These are difficult problems. They're not going to have easy solutions. The good news is that we're at least very aware of them now. But there aren't easy fixes, in part because they're not just technical problems. They're societal problems about what it is to be fair and unbiased in our society. Those are questions that I hope the whole of the Academy are going to help us address, because it's not just enough for us to try and put filters in or adjust the machine learning. It requires us to think through these careful, important issues about, what is a fair representation within our society. And that's a question that lawyers and anthropologists and sociologists and the rich umbrella that we have at universities need us to address.
That's that's probably a good note to end. The fact that we've got about 20 more questions that I can't ask you tells me that...
I'll be around, so you can please come and ask me them.
The session chair's concern is always that you don't get the questions. I haven't had that problem today. You've been terrific with your time, and I know you do such an enormous amount of outreach, Toby, that thank you also for the work that you do in that regard.